that the leaders of the Greater Houston Partnership do the right thing and stand up for voting rights.
That's right.
I believe every eligible Texan should have an equal opportunity to register and vote in a free and fair elections. HB 3, SB 1, and the other horrendous voter suppression bills that Texas Republican leaders have tried to force on us are no different than the Jim Crow laws of the 1890s to 1960s.
That's right.
That's right. These bills must be defeated. Texans of color, those with disabilities, those who work shifts or several jobs, and the elderly will face new barriers to improve their lives by having a say in government. Through voting, Texas is already the hardest state to vote in. 20 states and Washington, D.C. have automatic voting registration. We should have automatic voter registration here in Texas. 45 of the 50 states and Washington, D.C. allow any voter to vote by mail. Everyone in Texas should be able to vote by mail. In Maine and Vermont, you can vote in prison. In Texas, a black woman, Crystal Mason, was sentenced to prison for voting while on parole. Prisoners should be able to vote in Texas. There is no reason why the people of Texas should not have all the voting rights that the people in any other states have. If the leaders of the Greater Houston Partnership truly believe in diversity, equity, and inclusion, then thoughtful actions are required to champion diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. Both are at the ballot box and in the workplace. That's right. We call on the Greater Houston Partnership to use its power and influence to oppose HB 3, SB 1, and any other voter suppression bill that may come up in the future. We also call on the Greater Houston Partnership to condemn Governor Abbott's defunding of co-equal branches of government. That's right. This is the type of thing that dictators do. The Texas Organizing Project and our allies will continue to fight against Jim Crow 2.0 until we have the Texas we deserve, a Texas for all of us. GHP stands with us in defense and democracy and on the right side of history. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Oscar, for those words. Our next speaker will be Carisha Rogers from Texas Rising.
All right, good. All right.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Carisha Rogers. I am a regional coordinator for Texas Rising. We are an organization that focuses on youth in Texas, and especially my focus here are the youth here in Houston who will be the future voters of the Texas. The main reason I'm here today is because we have been constantly fighting time after time in the state capitol, going back and forth to Austin, having to consistently fight against these suppression bills for hours on end, 12 hours multiple times, and it's got to stop. Now today we're here with the Greater Houston Partnership, and we want to call them out to come to action and say that they're against this current voter suppression bill instead of the tactics they've been using today. They have been silent, and they have been advocating for the wrong issues, such as the I-45 project, which many people in Houston are against. We do not have time for these games, and we don't have time for them trying to protect their political interests at this point. We need action from the GHP, and we are going to sit there and demand it as many times as necessary. So yes, so we are going to be doing constant actions. We're going to be in Austin every time. We're going to be here every time. We're going to get this point across that today is enough. GHP, take action today. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Lydia Nunez from Gulf Coast Adapt. Lydia.
My name is Lydia Nunez, and I'm with the disability justice group Gulf Coast Adapt. Maria Palacios, Gary Lynn, and Shemaine.
Right.
We're here today to show GHP what diversity, equity, and inclusion actually look like.
All right.
We're here today to tell GHP that diversity, equity, and inclusion should not be reduced to corporate doublespeak, performed cynically for optics, are used as a networking opportunity for those who already have money and connections.
All right.
You see, GHP, sincere inclusion requires speaking out against attempts to undermine democracy through voter suppression efforts. For our democracy to thrive, we need diversity at the polls, where a diversity of ideas can have a voice and a genuine seat at the table.
That's right.
That's right.
Authentic equity and inclusion requires equal access to voting, not barriers like unfair ID requirements, making it difficult and risky for non-relatives to transport people like me who can't drive to the polls, are limiting curbside or drive-through voting, our ballot drop box locations. Democracy is on the line, and GHP needs to walk their talk or call today's luncheon what it really is: homogeneity, inequity, and exclusion.
I'm not so good at backing up.
It's all right. It's all right. We'll take time for you. Thank you. Okay, so our next speaker is you, Ben. So I hand off the media responsibilities to the professionals and come up. Ben Chu from Indivisible Houston. Excuse me, from Both Simple.
Hello everyone, my name is Benjamin Chow. I am an employee of the Harris County Elections Department, but here I am in my personal capacity. This past year, I helped to create what is known as drive-through voting here in Harris County. We were so successful that nearly 130,000 people, Harris County voters, used drive-through voting, even though it was the first time it was used in the state of Texas. Drive-through voting is more than just a new way to vote. It is a way that thousands of Houstonians use because but for drive-through voting, they would not have felt safe enough to vote this past year. The people who used drive-through voting the most were mothers with young children. They wanted to vote, but they also wanted to vote safely because they didn't want to expose their children to the coronavirus. Yet they still wanted to ensure their children saw how important it was for them to partake in our democracy. So our message to the Greater Houston Partnership is this: it's time to get off the sidelines.
That's right.
If you want to actually stand for diversity, equity, and inclusion, then you gotta step up, because your silence is deafening. Your silence is telling us that you don't care about people of color, you do not care about people with disabilities, you do not care about the vast majority of people who live in Harris County, and yet you still want our dollars. How dare you? Stand up for diversity, and not just for the top 1%, by including your support for our voting rights, and you can do that very simply. Send a public message to Governor Abbott and our legislature that you oppose their voter suppression bills and you oppose the reconstruction of Highway 45 unless it incorporates our community's voices. Thank you very much.
Okay, and our next speaker will be Daniel Cohen from Indivisible Houston.
Others have already said a lot of what I could say, but I'd like to just stress a few things. The Greater Houston Partnership doesn't mind when Black Houstonians and Brown Houstonians and Houstonians with disabilities are doing the labor that they can profit off of. They don't mind these Houstonians when they're the consumers of their products. They only mind Black and Brown Houstonians, Houstonians with disabilities, Houstonians with a few jobs when it comes to having political power and leverage over them when they're opposing something that they want. As long as you're willing to sell people out, then they're happy to host you at the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Conference, or the so-called Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Conference inside their building. But if you are not willing to sell people out, if you are going to show them dissent, if you are going to voice opposition to what they want, then they will shuffle you across the street and attempt to silence you in the face of a public debate. They don't have the guts to come out here and have a conversation with us. Then they would have to admit they're on the wrong side of history, and they would have to admit that they are two-faced on the issue of whether or not they take positions in the face of consensus or lack thereof. And here's what I mean by that. Greater Houston Partnership had a discussion inside their building regarding the voter suppression efforts and the anti-voting legislation of Greg Abbott. 13 of the 15 people who spoke at that meeting opposed the bills and encouraged them to oppose the bills as well. Of the 2 people who were in favor of Greg Abbott's position, one was Heidi Cruz. She works for Goldman Sachs, but she's better known as the wife of Ted Cruz. Now, when she's not running off to Cancun, apparently she's in a partnership tower conference room saying that if you stand up for voting rights, you must be a communist. Because that's exactly what she said in the Greater Houston Partnership meeting. Now, this is ridiculous. Denying people the right to vote is denying them a basic civil right, and we demand that GHP protect our vote. Our final speaker here with Wuri Juntos is Hyunjae Norman, and I welcome her to the podium.
Hi, my name is Hyunjae Norman. I am here to represent Wuri Juntos, an organization that advances voting rights in the Korean community. Wuri Juntos is a community organization which focuses on civic participation for Korean seniors and the first-time voters who need assistance to cast their ballot. During the early voting days of every election, Wuri Juntos hold the Korean American Early Voting Day at Trinity Mendel Hall Community Center in Spring Branch, where many Korean Americans live and have business. Every election, I serve as one of the voter assistants. When a Korean voter comes to vote, they look for our booth and request assistance. At this point, HB3 would require that the voter assistant would have to fill in a form as outlined in Section 602. When our seniors come to vote in bars with 20 people together, our voter assistant need to fill out the form for each of 20 people. It will take much longer and it is much difficult for everyone who is waiting in the line. Our work allows them to cast their ballot and encourage voters to come back and vote in future elections. Last year, more people voted because they had more voting options like vote by mail. Eligible voters who are over 65 years old get their application for ballot by mail from the Harris County Clerk's office. They simply verify their name, information, and signed and edit, posted, and send it back. It was so convenient for all the voters. 3 will increase barriers to voter with limited English proficiency. So they might not come to vote because they cannot find any assistance like me. The Greater Houston Partnership has an incredible opportunity to influence the state legislature on historic voter suppression legislation here.
That's right. That's right.
Voter suppression is not good for business. Okay. 우리 훈tus urge the Greater Houston Partnership to follow through on its supposed commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion by demanding the Texas legislature desist in voter suppression. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming out today. That was our last speaker, but we are open for any questions that we may have from the media. Any questions? Any questions?
So how many, have you kind of tried to figure out the extent of impact, the part about only family members giving transportation to voters? Have you made any kind of calculations on how that's going to play out? Obviously, you brought that up in your discussion, but I'm just looking at something that's tangible that says, okay, this affects thousands of people. This is, this how it has there been any kind of focus on exactly how that can play out?
Yes. You want to answer that one particularly?
Well, not only.
You need to come up to the microphone.
Okay. Sorry.
It's okay.
I'll hold you. Thank you. Not only will it affect our elders, but it will also impact people with disabilities. Also, you have to think that there are people who are living in, assisted living kind of communities that need, transportation and vans. So that's going to affect them. It's going to affect disabled people. Our elder senior citizens, we can't drive. So, we need that. And then sometimes our churches understand that we don't have access to transportation. So they'll help us out by picking us up and taking us to the polls. And this will limit that, it causes a type of surveillance, where they're surveilling older and disabled people. And this circumscribes our right to democracy, our right to citizenship.
In HB 3 and Senate Bill 1, both of the voter suppression bills, there are provisions in there that require that if you're going to bring more than 3 people into curbside voting, then they're going to have to get out of the car. If you're not the voter at that one time, so if the other 2 are people that are assisting, they got to get in a car. Doesn't matter if it's flooding, doesn't matter if it's thunderstorming, doesn't matter if it's a 115-degree weather day. You got to get in a car. If you or as the driver have some kind of disability, it doesn't matter. You still got to get out of the car. What we expect is, as you saw, there were Metro Lift vehicles coming behind us. There are thousands of people in Harris County. We're the #1 most populous county in terms of people with disabilities and people who need language assistance. Right. Those are the communities that are going to be hurt badly. We know that there will be thousands of those people because we know that there are thousands who use language translation at each one of our polling locations. And that means anytime they bring people on a bus to come and vote, they're all going to get out, or they're all going to have family members bring them only, which means that you cannot just have an interpreter like Hyunja there. You're going to need to have someone else that is a family member that has to take time off of work to come and assist you to vote. So we know that there will be thousands, potentially tens of thousands, who will be disenfranchised, who are people with disabilities and people with language assistance needs.
Now, has there been some response to this that these people are eligible for mail-in voting?
So just to give you a question, a lot of people ask, why not take more advantage of mail-in voting? Here's the problem. This past election, you recall the United States Postal Service had severe mail delays, right? People who are seniors, 65 plus and older, are the biggest users of mail-in voting. However, people were so worried that their ballots wouldn't get in on time that they decided that they wanted to drop their mail ballot in person. And then, of course, what did we see? Governor Abbott limited to every county to have just 1 ballot drop-off location per county. We originally planned to have 11 to 13 drop-off locations throughout the county, but they wanted just one at NRG. So what that meant is we had lines of people waiting to drop off their ballots. According to Texas election law, right now, you can actually only have one mail ballot drop-off location and only on election day. Think about how insane that is. Our normal elections office headquarters is in downtown. Okay, NRG was a temporary location just for this past election. You want to drop off that one ballot that you have, you're going to have cars lined up throughout downtown waiting to just drop off their mail ballot. So that is the insane provisions that are currently in these voting rights, voter suppression bills that the state legislature wants to do. They want to make it more difficult to vote, particularly for people with disabilities and who need language assistance.